So this is going to lead us into arithmetic series. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So what we want to do is we're going to determine the values of our first term, n, or r in an arithmetic series. I'll just change that to r. D is for difference. We're going to be talking about r this time. And we're going to look at how do we solve problems in arithmetic series. So let's first of all talk about the sequence versus a series. A sequence is an ordered set of numbers. So it's just going up by a regular pattern. Series are the sum of all the terms in the sequence. Here's an example. 2, 4, 6, 8 is an arithmetic sequence with terms. However, if we were to replace those commas with addition signs, 2 plus 4 plus 6 plus 8, that is now an arithmetic series, and it has sums. So here's what the notation looks like. S sub 1, that's just the first term. There's nothing to add to it. So S sub 1 is actually the same as just your first term. S sub 2 is the sum of the first two terms. So S sub 2 is T1 plus T2. S sub 3 is the sum of the first three terms. So T1 plus T2 plus T3. Okay, so as an example, let's say we have this sequence 3, 6, 9, 12, and 15. I want to come up with the first three sums. So S sub 1 is just your first term. So S sub 1 is just 3. Okay, S sub 2 is the sum of the first two. So that would be 3 plus 6, which is 9. S sub 3 would be the sum of the first three, T1, T2, and T3. So I would add 3 plus 6 plus 9. So 3 plus 6 plus 9, 3 and 6 is 9, and 9 and 9 is 18. So that would be the first three terms of the series. So let's go back to Gauss's method and find the sum of the following series. Okay, so this method is used in a lot of branches of mathematics, but it's really applicable here. So again, if we look here, 1 and 9 is 10. 3 and 7 is 10, and then a 5 in the middle. So instead of doing 1 plus 3 is 4, plus 5 is 9, etc., you can say that there are two pairs of 10, which is 20, plus the 5 in the middle. So it's a quick way of adding up to get 25. Let's see here. So this is a series again. So let's look to see if there is a pattern. So I have 24, another 24, another 24. So I've got three groups of 24. So I can just multiply those together, 72, plus the 12